Hey guys, on today's episode, we've got a lot going on. I'm super excited. We are working on a 570S McLaren Spider white, unbelievable car, but we're gonna be doing a couple things. The backstory is McLaren called and said, hey, would you detail the car and get it ready for a photo shoot? I said, absolutely, no problem. So we're gonna bring the car when we're done to the photo shoot. That should be a lot of fun. The second thing is, I thought this would be a perfect example to discuss two sort of myths or confusion points, whatever you wanna call it. The first one is, what's better, water sheeting versus water beading? So we're going to talk about that. The second thing is, why does it seem like black cars are always dirty or swirled or hazed or whatever you want to call it versus white cars? Is there something going on between the paint colors that's making white cars just look better all the time versus black cars? So we'll talk about that today as well. So that and a whole lot more on Drive and Protect. This 2018 McLaren 570S is a Spider, so most of the time the roof is down, which, as you can see, somehow attracts bird poo on the inside leather. They seem to have a knack for the impossible shot. Anyways, this beast has a 3.8-liter twin-turbo V8 with 562 horsepower, a 7-speed dual clutch, 0 to 60 in about 3 seconds, and a top speed of 204 miles an hour if you put the roof up. Now, they're priced around $208,000, but this one here is about $225,000. To learn about all the gadgets in the car, the history, and the comparison to the other supercars in its class, check out Ryan Douthit's review in the link above. More on this at the end of the video. For now, let's just get nerdy with the detail. Just a quick heads up before the video starts. This episode is very heavy in content, meaning there's a lot of concepts and technical aspects. So if there's something confusing or maybe a bit unclear, make sure you reach out to me and I'll do everything I can to help. Hope you enjoy. So the car was dropped off by a McLaren employee from New York City, apparently after a few driving events or displays or whatever they were doing, and it was raining on the way up to my house. So the car was covered in dirt and what looks like leaves from the tires. So as you can tell, it is a wet fall day. Step one, of course, is to power wash the obviously wet and sticky junk all over the car and remove the leaves from the various scoops and radiators. I like doing this with warm or lukewarm water because it's cold outside and being wet and cold all day just isn't any fun and it gets you sick. So if you have it, make sure you use it. Next, I filled up my power washer reservoir with Ammo Brute wheel soap and laid down a nice coat on the paint and the wheels. I used wheel soap here because I could see and feel the paint was dirty, meaning it was embedded with contaminants, and I'll show you what I discovered later in the episode because it's super hard to see with a camera at this stage of the job, and I also wanted to let it soak for a little bit because it was overcast outside and there was no fear of it actually drying on the paint. So in this case, I'm allowing the stronger chemical to do more of the work, especially because we're going to be polishing it later on. I wouldn't necessarily use this approach for a regular maintenance wash. Next, I use Brute in its normal fashion in the wheel bucket and clean the back side of the rims with a mini wheel woolly, the front side of the rims with a mitt and or a brush. Keep in mind the CCBs or carbon ceramic brakes generally have less brake dust during normal street driving, so hitting it with a stronger wheel cleaner is inefficient and a waste of money in this case. Wheel soap and a few brushes is all you'll need in most non-race applications. Now, ironically, the most sensitive part is the painted caliper, so make sure it's not hot when applying any cleaners to this area. Even with clean CCBs, look at the color difference in the soap after cleaning on the pavement. Next, power wash and repeat the process. After about 10 minutes of soaking, it's time to agitate the paint. Clean your wash bucket out first, then add 2 to 3 clean microfiber towels, 3 big squirts of foam paint soap, and fill it up about halfway or so. Then rinse the Brute off the paint and start gently wiping with a microfiber towel. You notice the difference between using a wash mitt and a fresh microfiber towel. The towels seem to glide much smoother over the surface. Also keep in mind, washing or rubbing the paint in the same exact spot many times is ineffective and potentially harmful. Wipe it once or twice and just move on. Don't overtouch or wipe the paint. Just agitate it to loosen the stubborn dirt, then fold or rotate the towel to a fresh side every few wipes or as the towel collects contaminants. Work top to bottom as usual, and once the towel is full or 8 sides have been used, put it off to the side and start working with a fresh towel. Never redunking or reapplying your towels eliminates cross-contamination by 100%, meaning it's impossible if you don't redunk a dirty mitt or towel into your bucket. Once done, re-power wash the paint. Now, as I was rinsing out the front scoop, I flushed out more and more leaves, so I stuck my hand up in the vent as it goes up further and further. It actually bends a little bit to the right, which had felt like a squirrel's nest of leaves or twigs or whatever, and obviously this was all caused from driving on the back roads up to my house. Once I was done, the paint was still rough, so I deemed it necessary to clay it. Now, if most of you know me or have watched my videos, you know that I do not clay the paint unless the paint needs to be clayed. Kind of a weird thing to say, but my point is don't just blindly clay the paint because it's Tuesday or whatever. Have a purpose or a need to actually do it. So this is the number one question I receive. How often should I clay my paint? Now, my answer is really never, or at least I hope you never have to. And I always ask them in return, how often should you go to the emergency room? And they respond with, I hope never. And I say, exactly. Although this is a loose analogy, I hope you get the subtlety of my point. Much like the ER, I love it when I need it, but I do everything in my power to avoid having to use it. Anyways, in this particular case, I know that I have to restore the paint anyway. So this means I have two options. I can either clay the paint quickly now or skip this step and remove the contaminants later with my microfiber pad. Now, both techniques are fair, but based on the fact that the car is now wet and I can just simply squirt foam on the clear coat in less than 10 seconds and then clay the entire car in less than 5 minutes, I'm choosing to do it now. Here's why. One way or the other, the contaminants are going to have to come out of the paint with the clay bar or with the microfiber pad. However, if I remove the junk from the paint with the clay bar now, I don't have to deal with the overloading of the pad later. In practical terms, it means I require less pad blowouts because it's not getting loaded up as fast. I say this in another way. It's stopping me from having to blow out the pad, which is super annoying to me because I have to get out of my crouched position, which is half the reason my knees are all messed up. And getting up 50 times a day versus 200 times a day is actually substantial to someone like me. So if clay buys me a couple of extra passes before the pad loads up, I'm going to do that now. For those of you new to clay, clay works on friction, not pressure. So working quickly without a ton of downward pressure is the way to go. Notice the brownish color of the clay when I was done. We're going to talk about this later in the episode. Once you're done with that, rinse the car again, dry it off, work the door jambs, and you're ready for the next steps. This is McLaren's Napa leather, extremely soft and supple and what you'd expect from a $200,000 supercar. Napa basically means the leather is full grain or unaltered because the animal's living conditions and diet are of such high quality that there's little need to correct imperfections in the leather. Think of it sort of like Kobe beef versus fast food beef. Now, they're both still beef, but with much different processing, quality, and of course, price tag. Nonetheless, after a few weeks on the road, the interior needs to be cleaned. So off camera in the background, I actually had to replace the bag on the Festool vacuum before we got started because the last episode with the disgusting truck, I picked up so much heavy dirt and rocks that the vacuum itself was weighing really, really heavy. So I knew it was time to swap out the bag. So round one was a quick vacuum. With the mats out, use compressed air to dislodge the trapped dirt. It'll cut down on your detail time significantly. If you don't have any air, just use an interior brush in the seams and the crevices. Next, I sprayed ammo lather on the full grain leather and agitated with an interior brush until a lather was created, and then I quickly wiped up the lifted dirt into the microfiber towel. Even with just a basic cleaning, you can actually see the difference on expensive leather from the clean side to the not clean side in its depth due to it being more breathable and absorbing less moisture, which is pretty cool. I lightly cleaned the center console with my brush, then sprayed the lather onto a towel before wiping the dash because it didn't need anything more than just a light wipe. Do not agitate anything, the paint, the interior, or otherwise if it's not necessary. For our winged friend and its poo, I used a wet microfiber towel, sprayed lather onto the spot, and just let it soak for a few minutes, and then scooped up as much as possible. Now, the scooping method is really more for soft paint, as bird poos tend to have like seeds or pebbles or whatever in it that are hard and scratch as you wipe, so soaking and lifting is preferred. But although on the leather, you're really not going to scratch it, I use the same technique anyways. Then I used a normal brush and the towel method to de-poo the McLaren, and I repeated the same steps on the driver's side seat and the driver's side door. For the carpets, I used shag, a scrub pad, and a vacuum. Not super complicated, but they looked and smelled fresh afterwards. With the roof on, I pulled inside as it started to rain. The last step was to moisturize the hide and protect the leather from its biggest enemy, the sun, especially on a Spider. For the next step, I applied the new UV inhibitor mousse to the leather, allowed a few minutes to penetrate, then I buffed to a matte finish. Okay, as a convertible, much like skin, if you keep your skin out in the sun, convertibles are out in the sun, and if you leave them out there for too long, prolonged exposure to those UV rays, you've seen someone who's been on the beach forever, their skin gets burned and wrinkly, et cetera, et cetera. So that same kind of concept applies here, especially on a convertible because the top's open all the time. You really got to moisturize it. In this case, there's a ton of UV protection built into this particular new version of mousse. With the interior nearly done, I focused on the paint. Now, despite the white paint looking pretty good with the naked eye, if you look closely, which is incredibly hard to do on camera, by the way, you can actually see plenty of swirls and scratches and love marks, which are very typical or common clear coat imperfections. But the interesting thing is, why can't you see them on white paint without special lights or tons of effort? Technically speaking, scratches aren't white. They simply appear white because they reflect light off the inside of the V-shaped scratch and scatter the light all over the place, which looks whitish to the human eye.
So when the light comes down from here, right, from the sun,
Right.
it bounces in here and it gets trapped.
Yeah.
And it doesn't bounce right back and go like a mirror, go, oh my gosh, this is really shiny. When you look at a car that's got swirls or whatever on it and it looks white, that's basically the light going this direction, that direction, and not going into your eye.
Okay, so to drive my point home, if a white bottle represents scratches and the scratches are on top of a black car, they're super easy to see from 3 feet, 6 feet, and 12 feet. Pretty obvious. But if you now change the background or the color of the base coat to white, then the white scratches become camouflage against the white car, similar to that of the McLaren at 3 feet, 6 feet, and 12 feet once again. Just to kind of put the nail in the coffin, I also scuffed up black paint and white paint with 1500 grit and then did the shot again from 3 feet, 8 feet, and 16 feet. Again, you can't see any scuff on the white paint without really looking super hard, and then on the black paint, it's really obvious. You get the idea. So overall, is a black car different than a white car? No, it's the same thing, assuming we have clear coat. It's the same thing. It's getting scratched equally. It's getting beat up, abused, swirls. Everything is exactly the same on a white car and a black car, but you just happen to see it on a black car more. So that's why a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to buy a black car because it's harder to maintain. It's actually not harder to maintain. It's just more annoying because you see it. So here's something I wasn't expecting. After compounding the paint and blowing out the pads several times, I noticed something in the white paint after my 50-50 shot that I wasn't expecting.
When I pulled the tape up here and I was looking at the 50-50, if you can stand back, now again, it's really hard to get it on camera. If you stand back and look at it, the side that I haven't polished yet is actually darker than the side that I just polished, but very significant in person. So this was after maybe 3 or 4 passes. Can you see that? Looks pretty good, right? Now, this is a new pad. Now, what does this mean? I just washed the car and I just clayed the car. So I kind of took a lot of the junk out of the paint. But when you're using a microfiber cutting pad, you're actually, those fibers are going inside all these little scratches and kind of cleaning it up, leveling it out, abrading it, let's say. And then at the same time, you're actually cleaning it up. You're cleaning out all the pores of the skin. This is after I finished it, I went back and went, oh my gosh, I have to do a bit on camera here because this was just so strong and evident that now this car is truly white, and this is kind of like a dirty white, if that makes sense. So this is just a really fun example of cleaning the paint while you're polishing.
With the paint compounded and polished, on to confusion point number 2. Is beading better than sheeting? Well, I'm not exactly sure that it's that cut and dry, but I think it's going to be a fun conversation. I will say this, though, that beading sells more than sheeting. There's no arguments there because, once again, the consumer drives demand, and the consumers believe beading indicates proper protection. That's not my opinion, that's just fact. So with that in mind, here's kind of a fun example to exercise your brain and challenge that assumption.
Okay, for test number 2, we're going to be splitting the hood into 2 pieces, the left and the right side. On the left side, we're going to be putting product A. On the right side, we're going to be putting product B. Now, once I hit it with a power washer, you can decide which one you think is more protected, side A or side B.
After applying different products to the left and the right side, which side do you think is more protected? Can you tell with just a water test? Now, assuming that this is in fact a valid test, which one do you think is more protected? The left side that is beating like crazy, or the right side that is sheeting water off the paint? Okay, so let's go back and show you what I put on each side. Now, the left side, or the crazy beading side, I put on shortening or lard. This is a type of cooking oil that's going to make the water bead like crazy, but obviously it isn't a protectant. It actually promotes heat retention from the sun. The same idea with baby lotion I tested. Beads like crazy, but the oil attracts the sun, intensifying the UVA and UVB rays, damaging the paint in the long run. Again, it's the opposite of what you want. And for the record, for those of you about to leave a comment, all the products I tested were easily removed and I polished the paint afterwards anyway, so nothing was left behind. The car was perfectly fine. Likewise, I'm not suggesting anyone ever consider putting something on their paint that wasn't designed to be put on their paint. I'm just trying to bend your brain a little bit, have a little bit of fun, and promote a healthy conversation about the assumptions. Now, on the right side, I sprayed one of my new concoctions that focuses solely on a thin enamel layer of clear coat protection. Depending on what's applied over it, this chemistry tends to sheet water instead of beading water, which might confuse some people into assuming there's no protection when in fact it has a lot. So here's my point. Don't judge a book by its cover. Beading doesn't always indicate it's properly protected, and sheeting doesn't indicate it's not protected. Regardless of the beads versus sheet, your goal is to remove standing water from your paint. Beading looks good and indicates that there's something present on your paint, while sheeting removes large areas of water quickly, helping in drying and avoiding water spots. So neither is right and neither is wrong. Much like the food you consume, not all calories are the same. So read the product label and make a conscious decision going forward without assumptions. After a bit more polishing, we were ready to protect the paint with the latest version of Ammo Skin paint sealant indicated by the new clear squirt top. This is also heavily infused with new UV inhibitors I put in the all-new line. More on how this works in a bit. After 2 to 3 minutes of curing, buff off with a microfiber towel as you've done in the past. Next, I focused on the rubber and the trim. Again, this requires protection or sunscreen type characteristics to avoid premature drying or fading of the material. With the rubber protected and with a little bit of a pop now, I do a final wipe down with Reboot Enamel Coat that will boost the current layers of protection on the wheels and the paint. Now, specifically for the wheels, I do it after every single full wash because I always wipe down the rims anyways after the tire gel just in case I have some drips or smudges or whatever on the rims. But on the paint, I use Reboot to prolong the time between full waxing or sealant sessions. With most of the car ready now, I knew I'd have to touch it up later on at the shoot, which was over 100 miles away in East Hampton near the water. And because this is a corporate car, McLaren asked if I would drive it there and keep it clean for the shoot. And as all of you would have said, just like I did, I said, yeah, I can definitely do that. Once I got out of my area and gingerly maneuvered the McLaren around in New York City and got out to Long Island, it seemed to be a bit more at home on the Hamptons coastal streets where I was more concerned with turkeys than I was with other cars. Well, guys, we made it out to beautiful East Hampton. As you can see, the ocean is behind us. The McLaren is right there. Perfect setup and backdrop for a beautiful photo shoot. As you can see, my buddy Ryan Douthit from Driving Sports TV is doing a photo shoot and he's shooting some film for his YouTube channel. And I'll post a link down below. You can see all the nerdy things that this car has to offer. It's pretty cool. But more importantly, the car is detailed and we got to drive it out here, which is really exciting. And it's gorgeous out here. Obviously, my go-to product for this over the years was Spit Spray Wax. It has lots of lubrication and is super easy to use. But as you know, every year or so, I like to throw away the chemistry and just start fresh. It helps me think differently and not just rest on my past successes. So with that, after months of work, here's another new concoction of mine. This is Spit UV Inhibitor. Now, I always like the name Spit. I don't know why, but I love that name. So I'm using it again here, but the product inside is 1,000% different. Sort of like a rotary phone versus a new iPhone. They're light years different, but you still call it a phone. Anyways, as I mentioned before, the sun is the enemy. So check this out. Here's what I've been working on. Both jars have a liquid that is the same color and the same water-like viscosity. One is my original Spit, and the other is a completely new chemistry. Now, after a quick shake to coat the sides of the glass, and for demonstration purposes, I'm using a UV light source to mimic the sun's UVA and UVB rays, but, of course, at a much lower level and without adding any fluorescence or blue dye to the paint. The reaction you're seeing is merely a result of converting high energy to lower energy. So with the UV light off, they look exactly the same. And with the UV lamp on, you can see the new formula working by lowering the energy levels from dangerous invisible UV light in this example to a safe visible light, dispersing the sun's energy and protecting the paint underneath it. I still needed it to be great for touch-ups and lubricated dust removal, but now it has UV inhibitors, increased gloss, and incredible slickness, like ball bearings on your paint type slickness. Anyways, if you like touching your paint after you clean it, which you know I do not recommend, this is going to get addictive, so enjoy yourself, but just make sure your hand is clean. Now, these layers, once applied, are obviously super thin, but having this new deviation in skin, reboot, and spit working together to fight the sun is a step in the right direction.
As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you have any questions, shoot me an email at larry@ammonyc.com. I'll see you next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like this McLaren video, I have two others, a McLaren F1 GTR out in Pebble Beach in California, and then another F1 actual race car up in Boston that I think you'll dig. We did a full detail on both of them. If you like this video, please subscribe. As always, thanks for watching.